Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for the last panel of the day. So I know that you must be tired, so we'll try to keep it fresh and upbeat and interesting so that everyone can be involved in what we're going to talk about today, and you may also save your questions for the end. So my name is Katerina Theodoridou. I'm the Director of R&D and Project Management at the Center for Social Innovation. And we're really honored to present for the third year at the Cyprus Forum the results of the Cyprus Quality of Life Index, which is an initiative that is managed and run by the Center for Social Innovation in collaboration with Oxygono. So it's an initiative that we came up together, the two organizations, in an effort to kind of understand how can we measure the quality of life in Cyprus, and how can we find some indicators so that we can also measure the impact that some of the activities that people do in Cyprus have. So today, our panel is going to start with a short overview of the results of this year's research by CSI, and then we're going to go on with our discussion. We have our esteemed panelists that are here today with us. We have Dr. Elena Hadjikakou, who is the director of the Cyprus Pedagogical Institute, and she's representing Dr. Athina Michailidou, the Minister of Education, Sport and Youth. We have Dr. Marina Neophytou, who is the Dean of Engineering School at the University of Cyprus. We have Mr. Menelaou, Head of Academic Affairs and Student Welfare Services at the University of Cyprus. And lastly, we have my colleague, Mr. Demetris Hadjisofocli, who is the Managing Director and Co-founder of the Center for Social Innovation. So just a brief overview of the Cyprus Quality of Life Index research that we completed. This year, we did something different than the previous 2 years. We wanted to start with looking at secondary resources of what other indices that are at the European level they can show us about the quality of life in Cyprus. So what we did was to research the different indicators that constitute the quality of life of a citizen, and those were the ones that we also use for our research as well. So these were 10 indicators, namely you can see them there: economic well-being, health, education, environment, housing and living conditions, social relationships, safety and security, work-life balance, governance and civic engagement, and culture and leisure. Over there, the index that you can see for each indicator is based on different European statistics from Eurostat, from the HDMI indicator, from the Cyprus Statistical Services. So we looked at different resources in order to come up with the index for each indicator. And based on those European statistics, we can see that the quality of life index is 0.933 for Cyprus, which is quite high. And what kind of perplexed us was if the index is at such a high level at the European statistics, how come the reality that we see in Cyprus at the national context is a bit quite different? So what we did was to also look at the happiness index of the global economy, which showed a 5.87 out of 10 as an index for happiness in Cyprus. And then as a phase 2, we went ahead and we performed our own survey. We developed our own survey that was handed out to 1,000 participants with stratified sampling. So it was in all districts of Cyprus with a balance in different gender and age groups. The data collection was performed by IMR, a private company. So we looked at different demographics of these people. So in terms of employment, education, income, and we wanted it to be covering a lot of categories so that it was quite stratified and distributed evenly. As I mentioned, those were the 10 dimensions that we assessed in our survey, which were in line with the ones that I showed before. And the first question that we asked was how happy people are in their life. Of course, happiness for each person is defined by their own subjective measures, but based on bibliography, we feel that those indicators that we mentioned before and were the basis for the survey were used in the perception of people in order to come up with their happiness level. So we can see from the statistics that around 68% of Cypriots are happy and very happy, and we can see that about 85% are somewhat happy, and very happy. So in a way, 85% of people in Cyprus have some level of happiness. So if we go back to these first indicators that we showed here, we can see that we have 0.933 based on the European statistics, a happiness index of 5.87, and an 85% of people feeling somewhat happy. So these are not aligned, and that's what actually drove us to complete this research, because the rationale was that policies in Cyprus are being based on the European statistics. So is that something that is rational to do? Is that something that maybe should be considered by governmental agencies and policymakers, given that the reality in Cyprus might be something different? So going back to the survey that we performed, those were the 10 dimensions, and one of the survey was long, and obviously we're not going to show each statistics that was collected via the survey, but just the collective ones. So in terms of the importance of these dimensions for people, we asked people to rate them, and we can see in terms of the importance that 98% of people mentioned health, 89% economic well-being, 70% housing and living conditions, 63% education, and you can see the rest over there in terms of in descending order of the importance level. Now, what's really important to also look at is that in comparison with the question about the satisfaction of people. So you can see in blue the percentage that was provided for the importance, and in light brown, the satisfaction with these dimensions. Some of them are aligned, some of them are quite distant between them. And I'd like to just point out a couple. Looking at the economic well-being, we can see that it's for 89% of the people surveyed is something that is really important, but only 40% are satisfied with the economic well-being that they have. So that by itself needs to puzzle us, in the sense that if the indicator for GDP and for the economic well-being based on European statistics is rather high, but then the reality in terms of people's satisfaction is what we see here, then how can policymakers better develop their policies and come up with the different regulations that we have in Cyprus, so that there is a balance between the two? You can also see in terms of education, the 63% consider it to be important, but then only 34% of those people are satisfied with the level of education. When we asked about primary, secondary, tertiary, and lifelong learning opportunities, both in the public and private sector. Now, if you look at the lowest end, we can see that work-life balance, which is a huge issue and has been ever since COVID. It's important for 18% of people, and then 62% are satisfied with what they have in terms of their work-life balance. So that also shows us something, that maybe the dimensions that are not that important to people, they are happy with what they have in their life. So that's a positive factor as well. But what we need to focus on in terms of recommendations for policymakers is definitely the indicators that have an imbalance, a discrepancy, and of course they affect people's living conditions and people's quality of life. So I'm going to leave it at that. It was just a brief overview of what we came up via the research that we completed at the Center for Social Innovation. And I'd like to go to our panelists, so that we've asked each panelist, based on their expertise, to provide their opinion on some of the questions that we're going to be posing for them. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to start with Dr. Elena Hadjikakou. Dr. Hadjikakou, you've seen the percentage of importance versus satisfaction. Are you surprised by that?
Level and the satisfaction level. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Something to talk about.
So how do you think the current education system in Cyprus contributes to or hinders the overall quality of life, particularly in terms of accessibility and equity?
Education is an important aspect for in everyday life. think that education plays an important role in the lives of citizens, and it's an now it's better. Thank you. And it's an important factor in the quality of life. So, to answer your question, Katerina, this is not an impression we have. This is something which is proved through the data we have. More specifically, in a recent document by Eurostat, education is considered to be one of the 8+1 indicators of quality in life. So this is something that we acknowledge at the ministry, and this is why we are focusing on improving the level of education we offer.
What are the key challenges in improving the educational outcomes in Cyprus, and how are these challenges reflected, in your opinion, in the societal well-being?
In our educational system, we have certain challenges. Of course, the low achievement in the basic skills is a reality we acknowledge. At the same time, we acknowledge the fact that there is not the equity we would like. Through the participation in different international surveys, it is shown that children who come from a privileged socioeconomic background, they tend to perform better than children coming from a lower socioeconomic factor. At the same time, there is a realization, again, as is coming throughout international surveys, that our children nowadays, their well-being level is not so high. Cyberbullying is getting widespread. So again, this is a challenge, the mental, let's say, health of children that we need to face. Having said that, at the ministry, we have begun implementing a number of actions in order to promote this inclusive school, the school that is accessible by all children with no difference in their socioeconomic background. And I'm ready to give some examples of the actions we are doing. In terms of content and pedagogy, it is important to say that we have a reform of curricula. We had the first phase of reform of curricula during last year. It is expected by December to have a reformed curricula in vocational education as well. So by December, we are going to have the completion of reform of curriculum in primary, secondary, and vet education. As it has already been announced by our minister, we have a new system for student evaluation. This measure has been applied since last year, and there is a shift on the emphasis from knowledge to problem-solving skills, critical thinking. So this is another measure in order towards pedagogy. In the same category, we have the piloting of the vocational and technical gymnasium. The ministry right now is designing this project. It's going to be implemented on a pilot basis next year. And of course, what is now being promoted by our ministry is the Post-Secondary Institutes of Vocational Education and Training, MEEC is what we call in Greek, because the data we have shows that the graduates from these kind of schools enjoy a high level of employability. The second, let's say, category of measures we offer at the ministry has to do with the school function. We have, since last year, the establishment of the school evaluation scheme, which for us in education is a very important measure because the school has the autonomy to decide on its own, let's say, actions it takes. And of course, continuous support and training for school leaders is offered. I move very quickly to inclusiveness, which is the highlight of our ministry. We have the extension of compulsory pre-primary education since this year from the age of 4. And at the same time, we have concrete policies in areas that promote inclusiveness, like anti-racist policy, the human rights policy, gender equality, and of course the policy we have for students with migrant background. At the same time, we have an extension of all-day schools, which again is considered to be a measure for inclusiveness. I step to the next measure, which has to do with violence. We nowadays face different challenges at schools with increased levels of violence. Our ministry has been implementing certain measures on this direction. And it's important to say that we have a new strategy for the prevention of violence in schools, which is going to begin now in October 2024. Moving towards the end, we have the promotion of skills, digital skills, green skills, and they have a new project now. I'm reading it to be sure that I say it correctly. Is the development of financial skills through the provision of a financial education and literacy intervention program in grade 3 of gymnasium. It's what we call in Greek χρηματοοικονομικός γραμματισμός. To be more understandable. Yes, coming in cooperation with the University of Cyprus. Now, as far as teachers are concerned, we have a new dialogue. The minister has initiated this dialogue last week for a new scheme for teachers' evaluation. Change is being done towards that direction. And of course, it's very important to maintain the teachers' professional learning at high levels throughout their careers. And of course, the methodology in order to do that is through synergies and dialogue with our main stakeholders. Thank you.
I'm wondering, with all these new initiatives that are really important that we hear about them, and I understand that they are also derived from previous concerns and research that was completed. Is there room for evaluation of these initiatives as well? Because that's always the case where we implement new initiatives, but then if we don't have a scheme for evaluating them and looking at their impact, then we really don't know how successful they are.
So of course, this is a very important question, and I must say that we've been evaluating our main policies because there is no other way to improve. Just introducing measures with not having the relevant necessary data to move forward, it can be a hinder. I can say a couple of examples, like the program DRASE, which is implemented in certain schools. This one is being evaluated, or the program for the early intervention for literacy programs. All these programs are being evaluated in order to improve, or the STEM initiative we've been having in secondary schools for some years. These programs have been evaluated during the last couple of years, and we have certain results about that.
So I'd like to, because Dr. Hadjikakou mentioned things like job opportunities, mental health well-being, and the overall quality of life of students. Of course, she's mostly talking about primary and secondary education, but since you're looking at things from the university, from the tertiary education level, how do issues like housing affordability and job opportunities impact students' mental health and work-life balance, and what can be done to improve that, in your opinion?
Shall I give you mine?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I think now we're fine. So yeah, it's you said at the beginning, Katerina, that it should be a lively discussion, and but you mentioned also at the same time very important problems. That is sometimes hard to talk about it, in a lively matter and keep an open mind and a positive attitude. But yes, I will try and address your question. Of course, house affordability and job opportunities have a great impact on students. Some will say, especially in Cyprus, that these two problems have a greater impact on their parents because these kind of problems prolong usually the time that students live at home. They cannot afford to rent, and they don't have the jobs, as you said, that are capable of providing them a certain standard of living so they can move out. And all these problems, of course, have an impact on young people. Some young people, depending on their own personal resilience, might go through them more smoothly, but then some others might face certain serious problems when we are talking about mental health, and we can see that at the university. I can say that our mental health center that we have in place in order to provide all these kind of both preventive measures, but also to help students get out of this problem, have a lot of work. And some of them stem from this kind of problems. Of course, when you are not able to afford a place on your own, it's only natural that you will feel stressed. You will probably feel the anxiety on when things will happen to me. Certain students may also feel isolated from other groups that live together away from their parents, for example. A lack of independence. They also don't have the same opportunities of picking up responsibilities when they can, live on their own. Generally speaking, I would say that they have a slower transition towards adulthood. So these two problems, housing affordability and also the job opportunities, of course affect them in a very negative manner. Now, when we talk about work and life balance, of course, most people and students, at least the ones I have talked to, they perceive work-life balance, like a scale. In my perception, that's not very helpful because it will never be in balance, actually. Personally, I try to convince them to see the thing like many, many circles. So throughout their lives, at certain points of life, the circle will have more work, less life. Some other point of time, the circle will have more life and less work. The target should be that looking at the big picture in a timeline, not only at a certain point of time, everybody should feel okay about that because it's also different for each and every one of us. I like and enjoy more work, somebody else could enjoy more life. So it depends on the level of each student, of each young people in general. But yes, of course, when you don't have the ability to afford a house, when you don't have a job, either as a student or a graduate or a young person that can provide you the level of life you aspire to, you have this financial strain, you have all these negative feelings that we mentioned before. Only naturally this hurts the ability to create also healthy social relationships because you have to either work multiple jobs or you have to prolong the time at work in order to be able to provide for yourself. And yes, at the end of the day, you have less time to reflect, less time to exercise, to socialize, to read, to travel, and so on. So yeah, it's only natural that these kind of problems create serious problems, both on mental health and also the work-life balance. Now, what we can do about that? As a university, we have been trying to expand, for example, our student dorms. We only have a small number, so we cannot provide for the percentage of students that we aspire to, and we are still continuing to do that. And I'm not very optimistic that in 2 or 3 years we'll have our new set of dorms, but at the end of the decade, to be honest. In the meantime, what we are trying to do is to provide for the students that are in serious need other financial assistance through the Student Welfare Association, for example. We have a career center that tries to find jobs, part-time jobs inside the campus, but also outside the university for students that are in need in order to be able to add on to their family income. As I mentioned before, we have the mental health support through our mental health center. We are in constant lookout for more financial aid for scholarships, for example, for our students. It's a hard job. The university does not aspire to replace the state. I still believe that the government, the parliament also have a very important role to play in all these issues. But as a university, within our means, which are very restricted, our resources, we try to make it easier for our students.
Thank you, Mr. Menelaou. And we're gonna remain at the financial aspect of things because you've mentioned the hurdle that they also need to face if they cannot find a job. And I'd like to ask Mr. Hadjisofocli, how do you view the economic climate in Cyprus in terms of supporting entrepreneurship and small businesses, and how does this affect the overall quality of life for citizens? And I know that in your life you've supported a lot of startups and a lot of young people that wanted to come up with their own business idea. So we'd love to hear your overview of that.
There's a couple of things that we need to look at before we go into what we do to improve entrepreneurship, innovation, and all that. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is that we are not looking at things holistically in in Cyprus. You cannot impact change by changing one thing out of the 100 things that impact something. Maybe an idea, besides the startups and the businesses, is instead of having only a national security advisory board for the president, to have a national development advisory board that decides on policy based on scientific evidence, implements, manages, and monitors our development, and do that in the long term, in a horizon of maybe, I would say, 25 to 30 years, because that's a cycle that somebody is born, is going to go to school, is going to go to university, is going to start working, is going to choose a career. So we need to look at big cycles. So the big cycles that Menelaos is talking about, I think they need to have the timeline in a way that it makes sense to develop. Now, in terms of entrepreneurship, we do exactly that. I mean, we don't look at things holistically. So I will say that we do some things okay. For example, there is some legislation, some legal framework that is put together to encourage innovation, investments, startups and all that, entrepreneurship, that in terms will create high-value jobs. So university graduates, which we have a lot in Cyprus, will have the jobs that they should have based on the education that they received. Remember, we are a country where we say everybody is educated, everybody has master's degree, and now everybody is having doctorate degrees. But people don't get the jobs that align with the investment they made, the intellectual investment to get those degrees. So one is the legal framework, the other one is a holistic approach. Financial framework, there is nothing in terms of to promote the development of new technologies. And when we say startups, we're not talking about opening a coffee shop. We're talking about activities that create high-value jobs, that create technology, that puts Cyprus ahead of the game. The biggest problem that we have from all of this is timing. We don't do anything on time. You know, education, for example, we know, and our friends at the ministry know for a long time what needs to be done. However, the system doesn't allow them to change things quickly. And I'm going to be a little bit controversial. I'm going to mention unions, for example. They have a part to play in terms of not allowing things to happen as quickly as possible. I mean, the same people that maybe work in the education system, they're not as willing to change and learn new things and adapt. Like, for example, a teacher, K through 12 at any level, who went into the profession 30 years ago and now is perhaps around 55, the changes in technology, in educational technology, from when that person started to now are amazing. If that person doesn't take advantage of all the tools that the Pedagogical Institute, for example, offers to go and learn and adapt and become, align themselves with what's going on in the economy, then we have all these problems. So timing is a big issue. Timing is also a big issue in businesses. So, yeah, it's a lot of things that we need to change that I'm talking about. But for sure, timing is important. Look at things holistically and work together, all of us together, to impact change. We cannot do it one at a time.
I'd like to go to the dimension of environment, Dr. Neophytou. If we look at the results of the survey that we have here, 46% of people found they consider environment to be important, and then 41% are satisfied with what they have in their neighborhood or in the policies that exist. So based on your expertise and how you look at things at the European level, but also at the national level, how do environmental policies in Cyprus address current challenges related to pollution, waste management, and climate change? And are they adequate to protect us and our quality of life in the long term?
First of all, please let me reflect Before answering your question, please let me reflect the fact that this discussion today happens under the sounds of the war in a nearby Middle Eastern country, in Lebanon, Gaza, and then in Ukraine. So it's really important because part of the public discussion on energy and green transition happens under the terms of geopolitical antagonism. Let me emphasize the importance of peace as well as part of quality of life. And peace not as a granted good, but peace as a continuous process through concerted actions, and environment is actually a very important field space through which such actions are timely needed. We're at time zero, and it's very important to realize that geographically the environment cannot be divided, and it's a kind of hypocrisy to talk about energy transition, climate change, local climate change just for the half part of it. So because my co-panelists here talk about putting things holistically, I wanted to put this dimension first. And then to proceed also with the result of the statistics, just to say that the fact that people do not think that environment is important is really also part of the problem. It's once citizens realize that the connection, that humanity is part of the environmental ecosystem, then they realize how much environment connects to their prosperity, to wellness, to their health, and so forth. So environmental consciousness and thereby environmental citizenship are very crucial also parts of this process. So to your question, which was, I don't remember exactly how it was termed, but so, although in terms of European directives, we directly translate all the news into national laws and so forth and policies, unfortunately, and I'm sorry that I don't bear very good news, there is too little and too late done. So we're very, very weak in the implementation of laws, so in the monitoring, in the governance, we're very weak, I'm sorry to say. And that's why it's very important, and within the university, we are trying to address this implementation and practical side of environmental engineering. How do we promote quality assurance, ensuring, for example, that terms during permit granting are respected duly and not just on papers? So all this, we worked with the Professional Board of Engineers because this is a profession actually that hasn't been yet officially, formally qualified. In the University of Cyprus, we're actually starting next September a new course in environmental engineering, dedicated an undergraduate course, in order to help augment and improve the practice in the field of environmental quality. So the answer to your question, regardless of whether it's climate change or waste management or first one, pollution, unfortunately, we have all the laws, we have all the policies on the paper, but we're still lag behind on the implementation. So, yes, this is my answer to this.
So sorry. Just a follow-up question, because I do understand where you're coming from, and unfortunately, I wish you had better news to share with us. However, in terms of the simple life and the daily life, we do see that there are many environmental organizations, that there are many citizens that are very concerned, and activists as well. So is it not enough in order to make a change so that it goes on to the policy-making level? what is it that we need so that more people are sensitized and maybe they can be part of what is needed in order to make things not too little and too late?
For sure, activism has helped a lot to to exert the political pressures on the decision makers and really change things on how practically things are implemented. Nevertheless, we should not rely totally only on activism. So there are a lot of things to be improved on governance. Unfortunately, environmental practice unavoidably brings in conflict of interest with economic interests. So it's very important also to address the rule of law and fair treatment of things. So yes, that's why we're trying in this new generation of engineers to bring in the socio-political context in the practice, which is what we have identified as lacking in the actual really experience of citizens for environmental quality. I take an example, so to speak more specifically, why. Let's take about the energy and climate, the National Energy and Climate Plan. We have plans for every decade. We have a plan for 2030. We try to reduce our greenhouse gases. A few years back, when I was talking with the Department of Environment, they were not even convinced why Cyprus, a small country, should really do all this effort because it's a small country and what would be the impact in the global climate change. So, of course, the answer is that climate is not only global, it's also local. And there are a lot of things, how we design our cities, how we build our houses, how much green we have in our public space, how much we rely on private cars and diesel cars, how much public transport. I mean, science and researchers have already a lot of proposals for that. So governance is and implementation is, I wish I had something better to say, but yes, this is where we try to push. We hope with the new generation of environmental engineers to improve practice and also to make sure with the environmental consciousness and citizenship, with people being more demanding about their quality of life, to bring the wished result.
Thank you so much. And if we, because you mentioned governance and civic engagement, so if we look at the results there as well, we can see, well, it's pretty much the lowest in the satisfaction of people, but at the same time, it's not really high in terms of the importance that they have for it. So that's also kind of troublesome in terms of if people in Cyprus are interested in active citizenship and being part of that change. So speaking of, you mentioned environmental citizenship, we're talking about now about governance and civic engagement. Mr. Menelaou, looking at the youth, what do you find are the most pressing concerns related to governance and civic engagement when it comes to university students, because that's your everyday audience, and what is their involvement in shaping the future of Cyprus?
I know. Okay, great. When I heard about what Marina said about lacking behind in implementation and institutions that are not up to speed and so on and so forth, I'm reflecting that, trust and confidence in public institutions are the bedrock of effective governance. So if we don't have that, then people do not actually believe in what you're saying to them. They don't believe in the actions that you're planning. They don't participate. And I think this is a major problem in Cyprus, the lack of trust in institutions. And when, public servants, beginning from the highest level down to the lowest level of public service, meaning president, minister, worker at the last department of the public service, fall below certain standards of integrity and accountability, then all this creates a cloud of mistrust, and young people can see that, can feel it and live it. So from my previous experience as well as the executive director of the youth board for 4 years, I had the opportunity to talk with a lot of students, a lot of young people around Cyprus, a lot of young people in Europe in general. And I can say that same problems are all around Europe. It's not on the same degree, of course. Unfortunately, we have certain similarities, for example, with the South. We don't have the same similarities or the same level of mistrust, let's say, towards the institutions with the North of Europe. But the lack of belief and the lack of participation in decision-making, in implementation, and so on and so forth, it's pan-European. Of course, this is not the fault of the young people. In my personal view, is mostly the fault of what we call the system that does not, first of all, do something about this. I mean, the lack of accountability, the lack of, to create the conditions for young people to trust the system, but also we don't interpret the lack of participation. Allow me to say that we interpret the lack of participation in a wrong way. Young people, with their absence, are somehow sending a message. They are participating. They are using different channels, perhaps. They are saying what they want to say, maybe with silence. And these are kinds of communication. And the system needs to, reflect on that and do something about it. Of course, some friends, common friends that we have probably, would say that the system, it's very relaxed, right now, because it suits the system for these things to continue in the long term. But opportunities like these ones give us the mic and allow us to say a few things. Somebody will hear, somebody hopefully will do something about it. And I'm not talking about others, I'm talking about us. Yeah, so that's the problem.
Thank you so much, Mr. Menelaou. So, Dr. Hadjikakou, I'm going to come back to you because, as Mr. Menelaou mentioned, youth are the future and we need to look at them in a more focused way. So we're not talking about just education at the primary, secondary, and tertiary level, but we're also talking about lifelong learning opportunities that can also play a role in how educated people are in terms of different challenges. So how can lifelong learning opportunities in Cyprus be enhanced in order to better support adults in maintaining a high quality of life as the economy and job market evolve?
Okay. Before answering the question, I would like to reflect on, because I was thinking about what Marina said and what Menelaou said about how the new generation needs to be more, let's say, equipped or more sensitive on environmental issues or citizenship. And this can easily be understood that it cannot happen from one day to other. We need to have early intervention. We need to begin from our education system, from our schools. Areas, environmental education and citizenship, are two specific areas that our ministry and special units at the ministry are doing very focused work. So even though the results are not as good as they are, I hope that in the future things, with the new generation of children, things will be better. And the other comment I would like to make is what about Demetris said about teachers and their lack of skills. Of course, it's a changing world we're living at, but I would like to share with you that our teachers in Cyprus, even though they are not, let's say, asked to attend in-service training, they attend in-service training in different settings, in different times. So, and the teachers at school are doing excellent work. And of course, there are some topics like new technologies, which of course they need to update their knowledge and skills, but it doesn't mean that they do not care about that. So I felt the need to make this comment. Very quickly answering your question, in our ministry we have a strategy for lifelong learning. There is a special unit at the ministry which has set up a new strategy for the participation in lifelong learning. It goes up to 2027. And the aim for having this strategy is exactly to promote upskilling or reskilling for adults who are not qualified or they need to change their areas of work. And at the same time, the reason for having this national strategy is to promote employability, having people working. In this context, the strategy covers certain areas, certain pillars, let's say, that have to do with the development of skills, digital skills, green skills, all these things we've been discussing, and the results until now are very promising. At the same time, the ministry is carrying out a project which is funded by the Recovery and Resilience Facility, and the name of the project is development of a national graduate tracking mechanism and design and implementation of an employer's skills survey. And what happens for the first time, there is a research on progress about graduates from schools, universities, and their career paths. And at the same time, there's a survey on the employers, what skills the employers need. And the reason we're doing that is to see whether there's a mismatch between the skills the graduates have from university and the skills the different jobs require. And there's a third project, which again is being financed from the same mechanism, which is the Eurograduate, which is a European graduate tracking survey, in order again to follow the mismatch between the education system and the labor market. So the ministry is doing these big projects for the time being, and I'm sure the results of these surveys, at least the last examples I have mentioned, will highlight the work that the different ministries need to do that in order to promote this employability between young people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hadjikakou. So going to Mr. Hadjisofocli, because we're still talking about, just to follow up on youth in the job market. In your opinion, how can fostering innovation, digital transformation, and new business opportunities improve not only the economic well-being, but also other dimensions of the quality of life of people in Cyprus?
Before I get there, I'm going to say I have the utmost respect for the education system in Cyprus because I'm a product of it, and I did pretty good. and I live with an educator, and I know how difficult it is, and I think you have the most difficult job from everything else that we all do. Going back to the quality of life index and how we can create a better ecosystem from a business perspective to help us improve quality of life. I think at the end of the day, we are victims of our expectations. I was sitting here and I was thinking, if I asked my grandmother in 1972, up in the beautiful village of Sisklippos next to Menelaos' grandfather's village, Agridaki, are you happy in your life? I'm pretty sure that she would have said, yes, I'm very happy. If we look at what she was doing in her life on a day-to-day basis, I think we'll go into depression just thinking about it. Since then, Cyprus went through a lot. We are fortunate. We have a lot of things that make our lives easy, more comfortable, better food quality, you name it. Yet we are not happy. So the question that I have in my head, kind of coming to an end of this conversation, is there really anything we can do to be happy? So I would be an optimist and I would say, yes, there's a lot of things that we can do. But I think all of us here today touched a little bit on this concept of timing. We have to plan, we have to learn to implement, to manage, and to monitor, and to reflect in terms of what we do. If we do that, and we begin building an innovation, an entrepreneurship ecosystem that is based on local values and indicators, we will have an opportunity to create jobs that are, again, high-value jobs that match the skills of all of us, all these graduates that we are sending abroad in these good universities in Cyprus, to get those skills and the education system, we will be able to match that. Once we match that with the technology that exists today in our lives, we are border agnostic in terms of businesses. So even if you're in Cyprus or Silicon Valley in the United States, if you create businesses that are based on technology, then you can create these good jobs. Our young people will have good opportunities to go and get good living while they enjoy it, doing the things that they learn how to do, and therefore improve their quality of life, and hopefully they will look at that way and not raise the expectations and remain unhappy forever and ever. So this is what I will say. We just need to understand the local challenges within the global context, and be serious about planning what we are doing as opposed to arbitrary actions in most cases.
So I'm going to close this conversation with a question for Dr. Neophytou, because at the end of the day, well, environment does impact a lot of the other dimensions. And because you talked about timing and not being ready, and there's a lot to do, you're an environmental engineer. So I was wondering if there are any specific environmental changes that you foresee impacting the quality of life in Cyprus over the next decade, and if you feel that the country can prep for that.
In brief, and then I will leave it to the audience, because I see in the audience some old collaborators and young people. So first, I would like to see more collaboration, as I mentioned earlier, between North and South, because environmental problems are connected and not divided. So, for example, I would mention an example that I saw a couple of years ago when there was an oil spill from Lebanon reaching the east coast of Cyprus, when environmental scientists were sitting on either side of the Green Line, praying and wishing not to come from their side. So I hope that we do not see this kind of approach anymore, and we find a new doctrine of necessity, and that is for climate change and adaptation, because really we are on time zero for climate change adaptation, so that we can work together from bottom up to do basic, simple things that really impact on our life. For example, a small example, planting trees. We have a lot of research in the University of Cyprus telling us that in 10 years' time, the temperature in our cities will rise by 5 degrees, that it will be so unbearable, not only just for the sense of comfort or discomfort, but also for our health, because the heat stress we will be experiencing will be so much, causing so much distress for our body that the mortality will increase by 2.5 times. So there are things we can do. We can increase the greenery in our cities. We can choose to build our buildings and cities differently. And there are a lot of instruments through European Union that we can use for that. For example, for the innovation of buildings, because a lot of our energy is consumed for heating and cooling. And we are ending up in energy poverty if not doing that. So there are a zillion things we can do. What I would like to see are the platforms enabling people to come together, and that would be, for example, for young people to work together and through entrepreneurship and implementing innovative ideas for environment. and also seeing more transparent and open processes and participative processes. Participative, especially on environmental issues, because European environmental law takes care for a very thorough consultation part. And that consultation is not, the culture of public consultation is gradually growing, and I foresee that this will come to a stage where we will be able to negotiate where we balance the rights of the persons versus the rights of communities versus the rights of larger countries and regions. So this will become more dialectic, but in order to get there, I think raising the consciousness and with the times, I'm sure the new generations will be much more active and engaged into this. And also, but for the current generations, really to work together, have these instruments, and be able to really work together for that. So,
thank you so much. And with this, we'd like to open the floor to the audience. If you have any questions for any of the panelists.
Have with us the member of the European Parliament.
I know.
So you can bring us the, we were asking about.
Yes.
Thanks. Anyway, yeah, I mean, it's different. I mean, there is other things to be discussed. When I was in the parliament, in the committee of culture and education, of course. And it's very important, of course, reskilling and having critical thinking, education. All these are big challenges, and we cannot finish it by here now discussing this. But what I wanted to see in our society, I saw the importance of culture, which was lowest. Did you pay attention to this? 14% believes that culture is important, and this is terrifying. This must be alarming for us. In that sense, I mean, we should maybe think, yes, I mean, this is impressive, I mean, shockingly impressive. So why, without culture, education and culture, we consider together, why we are so out of the scope of culture? And this really makes me to rethink, because culture is way of life at the end of the day. It's the way we do live every day. So it's not something abstract. So, and that's the only thing which makes me to problematize and think about it. And if you have to say something to this, I will be glad. Yeah, thank you.
Actually, I would like to comment because I had it also noted down. I would say when talking about quality of life, at least in my opinion, view, there are things you expect the government to do. There is a long list. I have written everything down. Good education system, access to good health services, quality job, well-being, fitness opportunities, parks, sport facilities, social safety net, environmental sustainability, transparency in governance. These are all things that in my list you expect the government to do for you. And then there is a set of things that you should also be alert and you should and you could do for yourself. And in my list is read and write and reflect and exercise. Culture is in this list. So I believe that we must pass on the message to the young people, to our society at large, that we need to increase our contact with the arts, with culture, with philosophy, because all of this affects our perception, our expectation, the way we deal with difficulties, the way we perceive happiness. So the government could do many, many things, but if you are not in line, you are not have your antennas open, you are not in contact with the arts, and I strongly believe that. When we were doing STEM programs at the youth board, I was insisting for STEAM because arts should be in there. So we are focusing on science and everything, but arts, this is my conviction, I would say, arts and culture will allow us, they will facilitate our ability to absorb the quality of life that the system should be able to. So yeah, we need to emphasize on that, and we need to create more opportunities to people to come in contact with culture and arts and philosophy and all of this thing.
So we try to introduce those competencies within our curriculum, because I strongly believe that if the school does not work with the pupils in this direction, we cannot expect the adults to have all these sensitivities and the appreciation of the different, let's say, areas they have ahead of them. So, of course, and the reason we're doing that is not something because we thought about it, it's something that, is emphasized in the education sector. You may know better than I do. So this is something we're working on, and I cannot emphasize enough doing things at an early stage, beginning from pre-primary education, trying to promote those skills when a child goes to secondary school. In my view, is late. We need to have early actions from an early age.
Take another question from the audience, because I think we need to move on to the cocktail, right? So the discussion can move on to the cocktail as well, but maybe one more question.
It was basically how do we count happiness and the quality of life with all the horror that is going on around us. But I was just informed that it was covered, so thank you very much for that. Yeah.
Any other questions? Maybe over a drink at the cocktail and networking session? Yes. Thank you so much, our esteemed panelists, for being with us today. Thank you so much for the insight that you provided when it comes to the Quality of Life Index and the different dimensions based on your expertise. In terms of the next steps for the Quality of Life Index, the Center for Social Innovation will move on with advisory groups so as to go deeper into the dimensions. So if you're interested, you'll be able to find out more about it on our social media and on our website. So thank you also for being with us. And thank you, Cyprus Forum, for giving us this panel.